Viewers, a while ago, the Black Lives Movement in the United States started pulling down statues of many notables. These notables were almost always Confederates, those who in their time either kept slaves, supported segregation, or opposed moves to abolish slavery. Famous literary figures were also cancelled soon after. This because in their works they use words to describe blacks that are no longer acceptable and should never have been used perhaps in the first place. Many progressives and liberals cheered this on from the sidelines. They said heritage can't be immune to rationalization, especially if it ceases to meet the requirements of a modern, tolerant ethic. Thus, viewers, in America, plaques on the statues of Confederate leaders, passages in textbooks, as well as in novellas and other works, could not be allowed to be airbrushed. And of course, viewers, also, by extension, airbrush a dark, perhaps the darkest chapter in American history. The idea was to bring out the truth, however discomforting and however damaging to social harmony, to enable a reconciliation that was much needed between blacks and whites. That was what was said in America, viewers, where this is a process which is ongoing. In India, viewers, however, the opposite is true. Even though we've been fed a diet of platitudinous history, if you are nearing 50, like I am, you will know that the history we read has several references to a golden era of cultural accommodation and synthesis. This synthesis, we are told, evolved a tehzeeb unique to India and was built on unparalleled socio-cultural integration. This is what we have been told, viewers. And this so-called Ganga Jamuni heritage holds India together. All of this, viewers, you will read in your history textbooks. The lived reality, of course, is much different. Now, I won't go into the examples of this Ganga Jamuni tehzeeb that are literally thrown at us the moment we open our history books, because there are just too many to list. But you're surely getting the drift. Anyone daring to challenge this version of history as written by virtue signaling liberals to paper over the biggest sociological fault lines in India was deemed an outcast, a communal bigot, a Hindu revanchist, a Sanghi. Viewers, yeah, they went to that extent also. But viewers, historical memory is very long. Long bottled up resentments over injustice have a habit of breeding resentments. Today, they are bubbling up between the fault lines. Opportunistic politicians are adept at exploiting them. But yet, viewers, despite knowing fully well that their version of history has upset crores and crores and crores in this country, very few liberals in India champion the need to explore the truth to effect a much needed reconciliation on the back of glaring injustices. Today, we want to set the record straight by beginning the conversation. And we have with us an ideologue who is perhaps the finest in this country, Mr. S Gurumurthy, also the editor of the Tughlaq. The question, viewers, that we will be pondering and asking him, and we hope that he will answer, is a very simple one. Was Mughal history whitewashed as part of some larger political project? In fact, is most of our history whitewashed to push a particular Nehruvian consensus? These are the questions, and I want to begin with you, Mr. Gurumurthy, by asking you on this recent NCRT rationalization, as it is being called, of our textbooks. Now, it has been met with apprehensions in some quarters. It is being seen by the usual suspects as a move to rewrite Indian history to suit the ideological persuasions of a saffron outlook of a government that is hell-bent on imposing a Hindutva model on this country. How do you react to this?
See, this has been going on for a long time. It's not something which has entered the public discourse today. Any attempt to have a reappraisal, relook, based on emerging evidence has been prevented on ideological ground. So I would like to say how Indian history is not only India's history. Indian civilizational history transforms into global civilizational history. And I am not going to quote any Indian sources. I will quote only two foreign sources on what is the origin of human civilization, which is the place of origin of human civilization. Whether Greece or India itself is a huge project for India, and it is pending for the last 150 years. First, Edward Pocock, in his book India in Greece, he brought out the fact that the Greek civilization, Greek language, has no origin if you remove India and Sanskrit. He was able to say he is a Greek. And in 1852, he wrote a book, and that book is this. And he made three propositions. All the rivers, mountains, cities of Greece have not originated from the Greek language. It has no meaning in the Greek. If you look at only Sanskrit, you get meaning for this. Greek mythologies derive meaning only if it is aligned with the Hindu mythologies. So he said, Greek is a derivative of Sanskrit. Pelagians, who were the colonists who occupied Greece, they actually came from India because the philosophy, poetry, culture, religion, and history of philosophies constitute the philosophy of Greece. And the philosophy means a wandering people. And he was able to construct a theory which has not been rebutted even today, that it is immigration from India westward that is being evidenced by a lot of Indian names, the names from Mahabharata, tribes, the Ganga name, across right up to Greece and Rome. And he said that without studying the Indian civilization, Greek civilization doesn't have a motherhood. In fact, a historian said the history and origin of ancient Greece were not written down by Greeks themselves. Without the Indian Puranas, Mahabharata, Rajput genealogies, they may not be able to have the key to understand their own civilization. So this is a much, much larger issue than writing only Indian history, because India's role has been as a thought giver to the world. Now, this is 1852. The British never allowed this book to be circulated because it went against their very idea. India is a land to be civilized. They have to concede, if this book is true, if the theory is true, if it is allowed to be debated, it would mean that India civilized the rest of the world. This is one. The next book is The Shape of Ancient Thought by Thomas Machiavelli. He wrote this book over 30 years. This was brought out in 2001, where he, by research and by copious references, he came to the conclusion that pre-Hellenistic Greece imported from India and Hellenistic Greece exported to India, and he put it so beautifully that the entire Socrates idea of Atman has no laboratory in Greece. Its laboratory was only in India. You know, this is a much, much larger issue than writing the history of kings, what they did and did not do, because this will put India in a very different position.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. I think you've given us a completely different perspective here. But coming back to the particularities and this ongoing debate, Mr. Gurumurthy, there is a pushback. Now, if someone like you were to say this and come out and then position or posit India as a Vishwa Guru and so on and so forth, they would say, oh, well, this is a fetish of the Indian right. And you know how they sort of are condescending towards those who say that an honest retelling of history is vital. How do you react to those people?
See, in a sense, I have been in battle with them, not limited to the field of history, but in the entire range of Indian thought, philosophy, culture, model, way of life. You know, Indian people have been struggling for connecting to their past, which was very, very effectively thwarted by the post-colonial Indian establishment. I would only call it as post-colonial Indian establishment because it never allowed the colonial theories to be verified, tested, and proved or disproved. The colonial continuity constituted the Indian intellectualism in the post-independence period. I'm just to give you one example. You know, first, the Aryans were supposed to have invaded and civilized India with their language, which is Sanskrit, which was accepted as Indo-Aryan. But the moment Indus Valley was discovered, the whole theory changed. The pastoral Aryans, who were not civilized, who were nomads, they invaded India and destroyed and established Dravidian civilization. Both came from the same source, the colonial source. Now, there is something very different happening. You know, the Encyclopedia Britannica latest edition has brought out Gordon Child's view in 1952. He said that it is a new finding which about Indus Valley, where I'm just reading out to you how important it is to know while Indus civilization may be considered as the culmination of a long process indigenous to Indus Valley, a number of parallels exist between Indus River and Mesopotamia. It is striking to compare both. Yet, nearly all earlier writers have censored the Indianness of the civilization, even while they were unable to articulate it. Historian Gordon Child wrote that India confronts Egypt and Babylonia by the third millennium with a thoroughly individual, independent civilization of our own. Technically, the peer of the rest, and plainly, it is deeply rooted in Indian soil. The Indus civilization represents a very perfect adjustment of human life to a specific environment, and it has endured. It is already specifically Indian and forms the basis of modern Indian culture. This doesn't find place in our textbook.
So, are you saying, therefore, that the time has come to perhaps not just censor or remove, but actually add material? Because, you know, some chapters, for example, on Mughal history have been excluded, others have been retained. Now, instead of deletions, there should actually be a genuine course correction. By that I mean the atrocities inflicted during times of Aurangzeb or Jahangir, among others, properly chronicled, and of course, a proportion correction should also be done. Because as you know, if you read our textbooks, we start with the Indus Valley civilization and then we leap straight with a few references to the Mauryas, this, that, the other, the Guptas, the Mauryas. We sort of stay for a few moments. Then we leap straight across to the Mughals. And after that, we go on to the British, and that's it. That's what our textbooks teach us.
You see, this requires a wholesale relook. And, you know, it dates back to the period of Mahabharata, Ramayana. Whether the Mahabharata and Ramayana were historical events or not is a different thing. But the geographical descriptions, the character of the people and their qualities, it is very important. I'll just give you one example of the rules of war which were followed in Mahabharata. Everybody thought these are all so idealistic. The fighting armies will have a drink together in the evening and then fight in the morning. What is this nonsense? How can this happen? You know, in the history of Kerala by Padmanabha Menon, he extensively quotes Whiteway, the author who had written the history of the wars between the Portuguese and the Zomari kings. The Zomari king writes a letter setting out the rules of war, which Bhishma told in Mahabharata, that we should not fight during the day, during the night time. We should not fight where people are. There is a huge playground out there. There are lakes on both sides. Your army can be perched on one side. My army can be perched on the other side. And we will beat the drum to say we are ready for war. And then if you beat the drum, you are ready for war, we will clash. And in the evening, if you beat the drum, we will stop the war. And the Portuguese asked, are these people asking for war or sports? This is a continuity. In fact, Whiteway says this is a continuity of 5,000 years of humanistic warfare. Is it not history? So it is not that something which said in Mahabharata was an imagination of a poet. It was a functioning model, functioning till the 15th, 16th, 17th century in Kerala. Down south. And literature 3,000 years before in Tamil Nadu says that for Mahabharata war, the Pandya king sent food from here. Independently written. I mean, all these have to be put together. Those who observed us empirically and from their own perspective of having to establish mastery over ourselves. In fact, Machiavelli in the Shape of Ancient Thought says the problem which the colonialists confronted in India is wherever they went, they had only people who were speaking dialect and no cohesive language or literature. But when they came to India, they they faced the biggest problem. Because the problem of the colonized people had the same language as the colonialists, Sanskrit. They were completely shocked. And so they had to say Sanskrit is a derivative of Greek. Whereas uh, Pocock and also Machiavelli have proved beyond both are Greek. Huh? They are not Indian authors. They are not leftists. In fact, they have brought together a set of facts not confronted till today, that Greek is a derivative of Indian civilization. So it's a much larger issue in which all these things, in fact, you look at the history and culture of Pakistan in Pakistan government's website, which talks of Takshaka as their forefathers, and Takshashila University, where Kautilya taught, where Chandragupta Maurya was a student, Ashoka was a student. And, this kind of owning the past, which even Pakistan is unable to detach itself from. India has been able to disown the past. And there are people in India who say that Nalanda was destroyed by the Indians, by Hindus, not by Muslims. And one famous historian says that Yudhishthira got his ideas from Buddha. I mean, there is nothing wrong. Buddha and Yudhishthira's ideas are the same. But why do you reverse the chronology? Indian history has been badly handled by anarchists. And they branded themselves as historians. And of course, Arun Shourie has written a beautiful book on the historians. We need a very collective effort to put together the positive dimensions of Indian civilization, which will show how the negative aspects of Indian civilization came from outside. And I'm going to tell you the final thing. There is a big research done by one scholar and R.J. Raman. he chronicled 2,500 years of mass killings in the world. And he said till the 13th century, there was no mass killing in India except Ashoka's Kalinga War and a few thousand people dying in Sati and Tagi, whereas 1.2 billion people died all over the world. If there was such peace in India, when the whole world was butchering itself, should we not at least look at what was that positive dimension which made India live in peace when the whole world was letting blood? This requires, these are all not Indian sources, the foreign researchers. But we don't have an independent mind. We got freedom, but we did not become
But Mr.
independent.
Gurumurthy, some people could say that that philosophy that made us pacifist, ethical, was Sanatana Dharma. Now, it is perhaps the fact. Now, if one was to start talking about it, then people will say that those people who are talking about it are building the edifice, intellectual edifice, of a coming Hindu Rashtra that is part of a larger national project to Hinduize all of India through changing the constitution. You know what they say?
You see, I don't think to understand the Hindu phenomenon or the Hindu origin of India, you need constitutional amendment. It is the consciousness of the people. Mahatma Gandhi said in 1908, that India is one nation because of the Char Dhams, Ganga, and the religious centers that unify India. He said, this makes India one in the sense in which no two Englishmen are. In 1908, Aurobindo, these are all not Sangha Parivar people. In fact, RSS was not thought of at the time.
Yeah.
Aurobindo said, Sanatana Dharma is Hindu nationalism is Sanatana Dharma, and if they are capable of perishing, India is capable of perishing. Nehru wrote in his Glimpses of World History, if you remember right, at page 502, that it is very difficult to draw a line between Indian nationalism and Hindu nationalism because India is the only country of Hindus.
That's right.
The next point he made is very important. That he said that the Hindu nationalism was powerfully articulated by Swami Vivekananda and it is not against anybody. All this changed when Jinnah asked for partition on the basis of religion. All these people discarded the entire movement, discarded the Hindu phenomenon, Hindu origin, Hindu source of Indian civilization, and began defending that India is not this, India is not this, India is not this. And that is the greatest distortion that took place. It was not corrected in the post-independence period.
No. Yeah.
You got to only tell the contemporary scholars, contemporary media, contemporary historians that this is what Aurobindo said, this is what Vivekananda said, this is what Mahatma Gandhi said, this is what Jawaharlal Nehru said, this is what Rajani Palme Dutt, an Indian communist who established the Communist Party in England, he said, it is not the British who gave us the sense of freedom through the English education. Even if English education had not been there, we would have got the idea of freedom from Vedas and Upanishads taught in the isolated Veda Padashalas. This is 1939. You only cite these things. This is the origin of Indian civilization, Indian culture. All these were affirmed by the Supreme Court in 1995.
That's right.
So you rejected the Supreme Court also. You reject Vivekananda, you reject Aurobindo, you reject Gandhi, you reject Nehru, you reject Rajani Palme Dutt, and you reject the Supreme Court also. You reject the people of India.
Well, the funny thing is, sir, I mean, I'll end this now because we've had such an intense conversation and let the people digest it. But unfortunately, even Nehru began to reject our past after a point.
No, and he didn't only reject. He went far.
He went.
He said in 1949 that Islamic fundamentalism, Muslim communalism is aggressive. But Hindu communalism is dangerous.
Dangerous.
I can't understand.
I think we know where he was coming from. We know where he was coming from, and we know how that entire edifice of Nehruvian secularism, as it was called, viewers, to create that, we had to create a whole new bubble for ourselves, a whole new history. And look where it got us. I just hope, viewers, that we can reclaim it. And let's hope for once that that exercise is not stigmatized. We can't repeat the mistakes of history because, viewers, as you know, that is catastrophic. I leave it at this. Mr. Gurumurthy, what a pleasure it is, as always, to speak to you, and thank you very much for enlightening us and our viewers. Thank you very much. Hope to see you soon. Thank you.